Hi, I'm Dan McCool. I'm the Director of the Environmental Studies Program and a Professor of Political Science here at the University of Utah. And I want to issue a friendly challenge to the legislators who sponsored this bill. I would like for them to come up with a list of 10 names of credible scientists who share their conspiracy view of climate science. So what do I mean by credible scientists? First of all, it has to be somebody trained in the climate field. When you march somebody out here that has no training in climate science, we should be skeptical of that person. It should be somebody who has published their climate research in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. We hear from so-called experts among the deniers that have never published anything. There's probably a good reason why they've never published anything. And third, credible scientists are people who don't get all their research funding from the fossil fuels industry. So I'm just proposing if they could just give me a list of 10 credible scientists that meet that criteria. I'd like to see that because I don't think they can do that. I don't think they can come up with 10 people that meet those criteria. What's important to understand about science is that it's a long, complex process that builds to a consensus. Now, you don't need unanimity. You don't have to have 100% agreement. But what you do have to have is a long process of rigorous testing and replication. And that has occurred in droves with climate science. And it is so obvious to people who are able to consider the data in a reasonable manner that there are thousands, not hundreds, but thousands of climate scientists who say there's a very powerful correlation between human activity and the warming of the planet. Now, there's a few that deny that, a very, very small portion of the climate science community that deny that. But again, it doesn't require unanimity. What it requires is an overwhelming scientific consensus. And we have that. We have that. And it clearly indicates that climate change is anthropogenic and it's going to cause us some big problems. Now, one of my areas of research is environmental policy history. And I just want to point out a striking parallel between the debate today over climate science and climate change and something that happened in the 1950s and the 1960s. Scientists began finding out in the late 1950s that there was a strong correlation between smoking and lung cancer. And the scientific community built a strong consensus that there was a correlation. The tobacco industry then engaged in a huge multi-million-dollar disinformation campaign designed to thwart the good science that was being done. And they used some fairly familiar strategies. Okay? They tried to hire their own scientists, hired a lot of people to basically cook the data. They hired doctors to travel around the nation and tell people that smoking was actually good for you. They were in the employ of the tobacco industry. And the third thing they did was they demonized the researchers whose data they didn't like. They tried to make the researchers look like the problem rather than smoking. As a result of that, it took many more years to convince the public and the nation that smoking could kill you. A lot of people died because of the machinations of the tobacco industry. I think there's a striking parallel between what they did with tobacco and cancer and what the fossil fuels industry is doing today in regard to global warming. The parallels are amazing, and it's not pretty. So what are we going to do about this? First of all, we have to focus on science, not political hype. There's an awful lot of information out there today on the web. We have more information than we've ever had in history. What you have to remember is there's there's also a record amount of bad information. And we have to focus on actual science, not political hype. We also have to listen to scientists, not ideologues. This should have nothing to do with ideology. It's an objective scientific question, not a liberal or a conservative question. Is the planet warming? Is it due to humankind's activities? What are we going to do about it? That's an objective question. And last, we need to let the data lead us to a conclusion rather than starting with the conclusion and then ignoring or dismissing